Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Silvia Rohr Samaniego. I'm the director of the University Art Gallery, or the UAG, at the University of Pittsburgh. I'm a white Latina with dark brown medium length hair. I'm wearing dark rimmed glasses, a deep purplish blue sweater, and gold hoop earrings. My background is plain white. I would like to welcome you to the 6th installment of Turning Points, a conversation series focusing on pertinent issues in museum practice. Today, our theme is artists, accessibility, and exhibition design, and we are very honored to welcome our special guests, Dr. Amanda Cachia and artists Carmen Papalia and Finnegan Shannon. Before I hand this over to Amanda for fuller introductions of our topic and our guests, I would like to go over some of the logistics for this webinar. The event will include live closed captioning and ASL interpretation. We will also pause at intervals to allow for audio description of visual material. I would like to thank Sarah Ashley for the closed captioning, Nick Miller, whose image you see in the screen. He is a man with a beard, short hair, and glasses against a grayish background screen. Who will be doing the ASL interpretation, and Madison Zalaponi for doing the audio descriptions. We will also include relevant links in the chat box. Time permitting, the participants will be taking questions from the audience. If you have a question, please use the Q&A function on the lower right of your screen. This event will be recorded and will be available for a limited time on the UAG website. I want to thank especially graduate student assistant Janina Lopez for co-piloting this event, both in the planning and in this Zoom room. I would also like to thank the Museum Studies program at Pitt and the UAG team for supporting the Turning Point series. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce Dr. Amanda Cachia. Dr. Cachia has an established career profile as a curator, a writer, an art historian, who specializes in disability art activism across intersectional axes of difference, including gender, race, and sexuality in a bid to dismantle masculine and ableist hegemonies. She is the editor of Curating Access, Disability, Art Activism, and Creative Accommodation, which was published last year by Routledge. This volume includes over 40 international contributors. Dr. Cachia currently teaches art history, visual culture, and curatorial and exhibition studies at Otis College of Art and Design, the California Institute of the Arts, California State University Long Beach, California State University San Marcos, and San Diego State University. She has curated approximately 40 exhibitions, many of which have traveled to cities across the United States, England, Australia, and Canada. And her curatorial focus is representing the art and interests of disabled artists and producers. It has been a joy to work with Amanda, and she has brought two wonderful artists to this conversation. So now I hand it over to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Sylvia. Hi, everyone. I'm Amanda Cachia. I'm really honored and excited to be hosting this session today with two of my favorite contemporary disabled artists. Just want to give a visual description for myself. I am a short-statured white woman with brown curly hair. Today, I have my hair tied up in a messy bun on top of my head. I have brown eyes and I'm wearing black framed glasses, and I have kind of like a cream-colored sweater on and a cream-colored jacket. I'm sitting here in my home in San Diego, California, which is currently a sunny day. And behind me on my wall, I have a kind of an abstract painting. And on one side of me, I have a shelf with all my books. And on the other side, a window, which is framed by a drape with kind of lines, patterns of lines on it. I also want to acknowledge the traditional lands from which I'm currently based, and here is the Kumeyaay Nation, but also in this virtual space, acknowledging all the traditional lands that encompass all of the folks where we're all from. So I just wanted to say that to give you all a bit of an outline of today's discussion, Carmen Papalia and Finnegan Shannon will be giving 10-minute presentations each, although that timing is a little fluid, right? We might have a few more minutes longer for some of us. And then after the presentations, that formal part of the presentations are over, we're going to open it up to you, the audience, to ask questions and engage with us. And I have my own set of questions too, but I definitely would like to prioritize having the audience be able to participate and ask questions as well for the artists. We have some really fantastic access providers working with us today, and I just wanted to acknowledge them here at this time. So Madison Zalapenny is our audio describer. Would you like to say hi, Madison?
Hello, so happy to be here.
And we also have Nick Miller, who is doing our sign language interpretation, and Sarah Ashley is the captioner. So thanks so much to all of you for being here with us today as well. So I'm going to start us off with Carmen Papalia to give Carmen's presentation. And by way of a short introduction, just on a personal level, I will say that I've known Carmen for, gosh, Carmen, how long has it been? At least 10 years now. And Carmen, I've really found such great joy in watching Carmen and in witnessing Carmen grow as an artist and create, more and more fantastic contributions to the disability art world that we find ourselves in. And currently, Carmen has a major exhibition up at the Vancouver Art Gallery in British Columbia in Canada. And actually, I'm flying there in a couple of weeks to go witness the show in person. I'm really excited to see it and be a part of a programming event there. I will just read out a little spiel about Carmen, which is actually on the Vancouver Art Gallery website. So Carmen Papalia is a Vancouver-based non-visual artist working in the realm of social practice. His artwork is concerned with unsettling traditions of cultural ableism, which he achieves by centering and affirming disability cultures in environments and places where members of the broader disability community are underrepresented. Papalia develops participatory projects that reveal non-visual sensory landscapes, demonstrating the possibilities of creative and justice-oriented accessibility practices. So without further ado, I will hand it over to you, Carmen.
Thanks, Amanda, and thanks everybody for being here. I'm going to start with a short visual description. I have olive skin, black hair, and a beard. Today I am wearing a green button shirt. Over that is a ice-dyed cardigan that is white and gray. I have a little necklace on too with a circle of wood and like I think it's a golden colored chain. And I'm wearing over-the-ear headphones and of course a hat. Today it's brown and wool. It's kind of like a cap style hat. I use he, him pronouns as well. And I'm calling in from the stolen land of the Musqueam, Squamish, Tsleil-Waututh, and Stolo people. So today I'll get into my presentation. Today I'm going to be talking about a turning point in my practice, which is my project Provisional Structures. This project really started in 2017 and it launched in 2021. The timeline accounts for, I think, me setting the conditions for the work to be produced. In 2017, I met Nicole Nugent, who is the curator of education at the Mackenzie Art Gallery, which is on Treaty 4 territory in Saskatchewan. Nicole invited me to come to the Mackenzie about once or twice a year between 2017 and 2021 to hold a conversation about accessibility with staff, framed by my 2015 Open Access Manifesto. And each time I would visit, I would build on this conversation. And in 2019, we started talking about how I could be involved in a strategic planning process at the Mackenzie that would coincide with my exhibition, Provisional Structures. I'm going to talk a little bit about the behind the closed doors work that I did with Mackenzie, because it's an often unseen part of my art practice, and it's also an important dimension of provisional structures. And I'll say too that, because we are so underrepresented in leadership roles at cultural institutions, showing disability art requires a lot of learning on behalf of the institution. So to assist with that, I designed a process that would unfold over 6 sessions. And I worked with a cross-section of staff from different departments and levels of management, including Nicole, as well as the Mackenzie Art Gallery's current director and CEO, John Hampton, who is one of the few Indigenous museum directors, as well as representatives from curatorial, development, strategic planning, communications, and we also invited a circle of community stakeholders as well that Mackenzie had worked with over the years. These were artists and curators, some of which are involved in what it means to decolonize or indigenize the museum. We also invited an elder from Treaty 4 territory, Elder Betty, and representatives from a local disability justice cultural organization called Listen to #2 DIS, DIS. And over the 6 sessions, I introduced folks to the principles of disability justice and the writings of Mia Mingus on access intimacy. I'll share a bit about what we read together, but the purpose of these meetings, the result would be a collective accessibility statement for the Mackenzie that was collectively written by participants, and as well as a set of guiding principles that would then inform the Mackenzie's accessibility policy in the coming years. So we read Mia Mingus. We also read Elwood Jimmy and Vanessa Andriotti's piece Bricks and Threads, which is about discusses Indigenous and colonial organizing principles. We read Eliza Chandler's writing on the idea of dwelling with disability, and Nick Walker's writings on neuroqueering. We also spent time with a bunch of examples of creative and justice-oriented accessibility practices. Many that were from artists like Finnegan and other artists that Amanda has shown. And finally, we looked at the mission statements from a bunch of disability justice organizations that I like, including the Disability Justice Network of Ontario, Project Let's, L-E-T-S, Fireweed Collective, and then the Abolition and Disability Justice Coalition. The text that we produced in its final form, again, is meant to inform accessibility practice in the coming years, and went live as my show Provisional Structures opened. And so I'll just show you the first image of Provisional Structures. In this image, you'll see, thank you. And I might get into details that aren't shown in these images, but here you'll see Nicole, who is seated with gallery attendant named Dave, who's using a wheelchair. And Nicole is sitting on seating that's made of sandbags, and these sandbags have the words open access on them. They are sitting in the gathering area of Provisional Structures. Surrounding this inner circle is a circle of mirrors, and looming above is a acoustical dome. It looks kind of futuristic or skeletal. It's made out of gray cardboard, and inside, lining the inside, is a sound dampening material, and it's meant to focus the acoustic space. Projected from the center is a keynote by an artist named Vo from a 2020 conference called As We Are, Disability Justice and Community Care. And Vo's keynote focuses on trauma-informed care through the lens of disability justice. And when I heard Vo give this keynote, I really resonated with it on a deep level on account of my own experience of medical trauma. And I asked Vo if I could include it as a centerpiece to my installation. Provisional Structures is a project that I curate and produce work for, and it's supposed to be a platform for other disabled artists too, and this is one example of that. Go to my next image now. This is another view of the structure. Here you can see a tower, like a monumental spiraling ramp made of scaffolding that it goes up to over 12 feet tall. There is a taut red cord pointing to the entrance to the ramp. It's an accessible ramp. The cord is meant to be a tactile wayfinding device. And the structure, as you're climbing it, it creaks and shifts as it bears weight. It affords you a couple different views of the space, including a view of a work by Jess Sash. And this is a work that's on the wall. It's not depicted here, although you can see the bench that Jess has selected for it. The work consists of over 800 bronze plaques that are engraved. And the piece looks is reminiscent of a donor wall at a museum. And each of the plaques has the phrase, "I need a minute" on them, you know, kind of referencing the honoring of crypt time. And this was Provisional Structures at the Mackenzie. So now I'm going to move on to Provisional Structures at the Vancouver Art Gallery, which is currently up now. And I'll show my next image, which is the view as you enter the first gallery space. The show occupies 3 galleries, and here you see monitors lining the walls on the left and right, and towards the back you can see some art on the walls. And the main focal point here is a circular seating area made of sandbags, and above it is a what looks like a large white tent hanging from the ceiling, sagging from the force of gravity. In fact, this is a parachute, and it's one in a series that me and collaborator Heather Kai Smith made. This parachute has the phrase, "Open access is a temporary, collectively held space" on it. The letters are sewn on, and they are black sans serif lettering. In the interest of time, I can only talk about the work that I produced for Provisional Structures. The other work in the show, which I selected, is from friends Sharona Franklin, Rebel Fayola Rose, who started the organization Disability Justice Dreaming, and my friends Grant Miller and Jonathan Lee of the Curiosity Paradox. And I just have a content notice right now about medical assisted death, and I'm going to talk about that for a couple of minutes. So in 2021, me and artist Aslan Thomas presented as part of the disability filibuster against Bill C-7, the Medical Assistance in Dying Act. Our presentation was about medical and cultural ableism, and also about Mia Mingus's idea of access intimacy. If you're not familiar with Bill C-7, it passed by royal assent in Canada on March 17th, 2021. And it expanded access to medical assisted death to anyone with a disability diagnosis for whom death was not imminent. So this means that people with disabilities in Canada can more easily apply for and receive medical assisted death than affordable housing, complex medical care, and accessibility support needs. It was organized, the filibuster was organized by Gabrielle Peters and Catherine Frazee. Gabrielle is a Vancouver-based policy analyst and writer, and Catherine is a longtime disability activist and scholar. And they organized this movement with countless co-conspirators here and across the border. And the filibuster took place on Zoom. It was a live stream that had a round-the-clock program of talks, roundtables, comedic and dramatic performances, late-night discussions where people were holding space for grief and the fear of eugenics. And for me, I really consider this the filibuster a milestone in the contemporary disability movement. I think it was a time where a lot of people working in disability justice were able to find each other. And it also served as a platform for various disability activist histories to be honored and recognized too. Histories like the self-advocacy movement, deinstitutionalization, and harm reduction as well.
Hey,
So my
Carmen,
next, yep.
just letting you know you have 2 minutes.
Okay, I'll try to cram it in. Okay, so the structure here, so the next image here is of provisional structure 2. It's meant to be a place to show all of the live stream content from the filibuster. It's modeled after my own experience during the filibuster. I would log on at nighttime, and I would be on my heating pad. It's with a blanket over me. It's dimly lit. It has sandbag seating again in it, and it's a towering structure that's made out of a sound dampening panel. So you can see how the dome has now become an over 20-foot tall structure. The sound panels are being supported by 11 wooden structures as well. There's an oculus at the top too. And in the middle of the space, there's a sandbag, and moored to it are the strings from 6 black foil balloons that are rising out of the oculus. These balloons are meant to represent the daily number of BC residents who die of overdose every day. This was a conversation that got some attention during the filibuster, how drug user activism is and harm reduction is a form of disability justice. So these balloons, they correspond to an additional 840 balloons that are installed in the windows of the Vancouver Art Gallery, representing the number of BC residents who are expected to die of overdose over the course of the exhibition. The piece is called Stop Fucking Killing Us, which references a committee that Gabrielle started with Garth Mullins, who is a drug user activist and host of the Crackdown podcast, and their collaborator, a disabled musician and activist named Tanya Aganaba. And they advocate for harm reduction and access to a safe drug supply as a form of disability justice. And that's provisional structures. Thank you.
Thanks, Carmen. I know it's tough to try and get it into that time frame, so thanks for doing that. But we will recirculate. We'll come back to you during the Q&A for sure. So now it's my great pleasure to introduce my next favorite contemporary disabled artist, which is Finnegan Shannon. Finnegan, I've known for less time, but I've really admired their work in the last few years particularly, and I actually hope to work with Finnegan in the near future. And I'm just so excited about what they're doing. I'm going to read out a little kind of, bio piece on Finnegan as well before they get on the screen here. So Finnegan Shannon is an artist. Some of their recent work includes Anti-Stairs Club Lounge, an ongoing project that gathers people together who share an aversion to stairs. Alt Text as Poetry, a collaboration with Bojana Kokliat that explores the expressive potential of image description. And Do You Want Us Here or Not, a series of benches and cushions designed for exhibition spaces. They have done projects with the Banff Centre, Argos Centre for Audiovisual Arts, the High Line, the Museum of Contemporary Art Denver, MMK Frankfurt, and the list goes on. It's quite an impressive list, Finnegan. Their work has been supported by a Wynne Newhouse Award, a residency at IBEAM, and a grant from Art Matters Foundation. So welcome, Finnegan. Thanks for being with us today.
Hi, everyone. We have a slide up, so I'll let Madison describe that.
An installation shot of a long rectangular gallery. To the right is metal balcony railing. To the left is a long white wall with track lighting illuminating Finnegan's 2D work. Carefully colorful cutout lettering in the foreground. And then in the center of the gallery are 2 rectangular cushions laid on the floor with text printed on them and 3 bright blue benches facing the artwork.
Thanks, Madison. I'll also do a self-description. I'm a white person with short hair. I use they, them pronouns. I'm wearing a colorful sweatshirt today, and I'm in a cozy living room space. I always struggle to describe my gender because I feel like how I feel and how I'm received are sometimes not aligned. So I would say like I feel kind of boyish in my gender, but I also get a lot of misses and ma'ams when I'm out in the world. So yeah, Amanda asked me to talk about a show from 2020. It was early 2020. It opened, I think, in January or early February. And the project was the exhibition was called Lone Proponent of Wall-to-Wall Carpet, which is a reference to a memory I have of being with a group of friends who were all saying how chic they thought hardwood floor was. And I love carpeted surfaces. They feel better on my feet. There's less pain. And also, if you fall, you have a softer landing surface. And then when I visited this gallery space, it is carpeted. So I thought that was kind of a nice way to acknowledge that feature of the space. And when I was planning this exhibition, I had actually originally thought about conceiving of I'm going to pause for a second because I think to wait to see if the ASL interpreter is back on screen.
I'm not sure. I'm here. I haven't minimized my screen or anything, so.
I'm seeing some thumbs up reactions, so I think I'm going to keep going, but I'm happy to.
He's back on screen.
Okay, great. Instead of kind of making a whole new thing for this show, I ended up pulling some threads of my practice that were already existing and expanding them for this project. And so I think I'm ready for the next slide.
5 rows of cut out lettering hung on a white wall. The letters are in all capitals and have a handwritten quality to them. Moving top to bottom, the first row in green reads students for accessibility. The second row in yellow reads staff for accessibility. The third row in red reads artists for accessibility. The fourth row in blue reads academics for accessibility. And the fifth row reads communities for accessibility in what I believe is Black.
So this piece, I call this type of work a portable mural, and it came out of an interest for me in working larger, but also working from home and not having a lot of studio space to spread out in. And in this mural, each letter is cut out of a piece of 8.5 by 11 chipboard or cardboard. And so it's quite small and packs into a tiny little folder, but can actually take up a lot of wall space. So it's probably 2 of my arm spans at least on the wall. And then, yeah, this was for a university art gallery, Carleton University. And so I was thinking specifically about the audiences that would be there and this idea that we all have a role to play in access. Ready for the next slide.
A wooden bench painted cerulean blue reads, "It was hard to get here, rest if you agree," in all capital white and seemingly hand-painted letters.
So I had the previous year, well, way back in 2017, I had this idea for furniture pieces for gallery spaces. based on my own frustration with the lack of seating that was available in most museums and galleries, and realizing that that was often a curatorial choice, and that by making seating that was also functional, or making seating that was functional and also artwork was a way of kind of sneaking seating into the space. And they all have this format of a statement and then an option to agree. But I think for me, the text is really secondary to their functionality as places to rest. And so there was a set of 4 furniture pieces, actually 5 furniture pieces that were made for this show. I work with fabricators, a new fabrication team local to the exhibition. So these were produced by folks who all work within the university. And so they change a lot based on kind of the specific fabrication tools. Madison had mentioned that this is painted, which from the image it very much looks like, but it's actually kind of like inlaid plastic laminate, because they had a CNC machine, and so they could use this kind of durable plastic material to make the lettering. And I think I'll go to the next slide.
4 cushions lie on top of a gray carpeted floor. 2 bright blue square cushions with red trim around the sides reads, "All this standing is painful, sit if you agree." And 2 smaller cream-colored circular cushions with blue trim reads, "I need softness, rest here if you agree."
So I had this dream at the time that the furniture pieces were going to be cushioned themselves, but that was logistically outside of my reach at that time. The fabrication involved in coordinating that. And so I decided to make cushions that could be kind of moved around the space and added to furniture pieces as desired. And I actually had the pleasure of working with my aunt on sewing these. So I printed the fabric with the text on it, and she helped me sew these cushions. There are also 2 bigger ones in the space that someone could kind of like fully lie down or extend on. And then one other thing that I wanted to make sure to mention about this project is that there was also an audio tour that I co-created with Fiona Wright. And I really wanted there to be description of the visual elements of the show. And I realized as I was reading through kind of the text that was already written for the show that a lot of the description was already there. It just needed a little bit of additional kind of descriptive support. And so we ended up recording a description with both mine and Fiona's voices. So kind of distinguishing the text that was coming from the institution and the text that was coming from me, the artist. And both of our voices kind of interwove in that audio tour that was available in the space and also online. And yeah, I think this project was definitely a kind of key moment for me in starting to think more holistically about a space that I was working in, rather than smaller, kind of more targeted interventions. And also thinking with specificity around a particular site or environment. So I think I'll stop there because I'm very excited about the conversation part of this.
Okay, actually, I was going to jump. This is Amanda speaking. I was just about to jump in, Finnegan, and say you have 2 minutes remaining. So, so that's fine. Great. Well, thank you to both of you for your presentations and discussions just to start us off. So I wanted to, like, before I open it up to Q&A, and by the way, if folks have a question, you can begin by, typing your questions into that Q&A. But I wanted to just start us off having a conversation with the three of us first, and just giving folks a little bit more background to the impetus to this event as well. Now that we've sort of heard from both of the artists today, the reason that I wanted to bring them together is because obviously I feel that they're doing really important work with access, clearly, but also because I'm sensing that there is a shift amongst contemporary disabled artists in that they're taking on the work of both an exhibition designer and as a curator. And whether that's being formally or informally recognized, I mean, we can talk about that, but just kind of like pinpointing this trend that I'm seeing that I think is really important. And the three of us have already kind of gathered together and had an initial conversation about that. But I wanted to hear from both of you about how you feel about that, because clearly, at least for me, provisional structures, Carmen's work, and Finnegan, your exhibition that you just discussed with us, and even your impetus behind doing the benches, where you said, it's an aesthetic object, but it's also there as kind of an actual practical tool that people can use. You're recognizing that this is important and there's a huge absence in our exhibition design. Is this something that you feel like, do you feel like you are taking on those roles? And if so, how, and how is that being recognized, and so on? And Carmen, I will just say at some point, I'd love to hear, I don't think you ended up showing this image, but there was an image from your exhibition too, where you have a wheelchair, and I think you have headphones, and you have I saw it in one of the reviews about your work, so it would be good for you to maybe talk a bit about that too.
Totally.
Sorry, I know that I'm lumping in a lot there. So let's go back to the first question I had about this kind of multi-pronged role that I feel like you're both taking on as exhibition designers and curators, as well as being artists as well.
Do you want me to? Yeah, happy to go, but
Yeah, jump in. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, so I do feel like this is I don't know if it, like, the work require, yeah, I do think the work requires it for us to have all those roles, because I know when I met you, Amanda, I was involved in bringing the context for when I wasn't working with you and outside of a disability sort of informed situation, bring the context with me. For my work could be understood or like received in a way that I was happy with. And now I guess, yeah, like, I mean, not much has changed with institutions. And so I think my role of, I have had to take on the role of curator and exhibition designer. And with this show in particular, with provisional structures, each of its iterations, I fundraised for via the Canada Arts Council and got grants specifically for those shows. And for the version at the Vancouver Art Gallery, I was able to get access funding that far exceeded our original grant ask for all of the artists involved as well. So I put I selected the artists. I was also supporting them with project development. I was serving as a buffer in some cases between the artist and the institution, times where the artist had lost trust or had experienced some degree of harm or dissatisfaction with the institution. And I also had written this narrative walkthrough of the show, which basically was like the visitor's experience through as you enter the space, and then finally make your way to the high wall gallery with provisional structure too. And what Amanda was mentioning is in the right before the entrance to the first exhibition space, there's this little like intro video where I kind of introduce the show and the work in the show in my own voice. And there's also a bunch of like mobility devices, like a wheelchair, canes, stability canes, one of the canes that I use, and kind of noise canceling earmuffs as well. And these were all to kind of just gesture to the audience and to signal that this is like a lived-in disability centering space. It's a place where we are dwelling with disability. Disability is here and it is on display, and that's the whole point. Yeah, and that's what you see. And when you enter, and you also are able to use those items as well. There's also a bunch of STEM toys in the show too.
Thanks, Carmen. This is Amanda speaking. What do you think, Finnegan?
Yeah, I mean, so much of what Carmen said also resonates for me. I think one way that I've thought about it is about the audience for my work and centering disabled audiences. Like, that is so important to me. Like, I've benefited so immensely from experiencing other disabled artists and writers' work. Like, being part of that ecosystem is just like, that's what I want to be part of. And so I want my work to be experienced by disabled colleagues and friends and strangers, and yeah, like, there just isn't that infrastructure or protocols or in the spaces that I'm coming into. And so I've needed to yeah, build that into the work. And I've also been surprised at how much power I have as an artist to make things happen that even, I think, when access folks within the institution ask for them, they don't happen. When an artist comes in and says, no, this is important for the work, that can sometimes shake something loose. And so I'm also attuned to that in terms of, like, yeah, kind of what can I what's possible within this role as an artist. And then, yeah, also going back to what Carmen was talking about a little bit, I think I shy a little bit away from curator specifically, though I do think that is part of the work that I'm doing. And for me, a lot of that comes from, like, my nightmare scenario is that people only know about disability arts through my work. Like, I'm just like this, I'm, one small part of this, like, immense and ever expanding network. And so by bringing, kind of building more artists into the structures of projects, I feel like I'm able to share in a kind of deep way that kind of, like, interdependence that I feel like my work has with other artists' work.
Yeah, this is Amanda speaking. Thanks so much, Finn. I mean, this is why I brought the two of you together too, because I'm really struck with how you both are so collaborative in your approach, that you bring in your disabled artist peers and colleagues and friends to make work together, which is really one of the big principles of disability justice. So I'm really thrilled that you're doing that work in a space and really showing, the curators within the institutions and the designers, this is how it can be done. And it's interesting, Finn, that you talk about, like, this power that you feel like you can bring to the organization, because conventionally it's the curators that have the power. So I think that you're coming in, you're able to, like, bring in your own set of power dynamics is really important in this context when we're trying to, advocate for access. Speaking of which, in terms of advocating, there's a question in the Q&A that I want to read out for us, because I think it's in line with what we're talking about here. So it's by someone who's anonymous, and they say, when you've both partnered with institutions, have you felt a burden of informing them on best practices in collaborating with artists with disabilities? Or have you felt that institutions bring an awareness to the collaboration? So who wants to tackle that one first?
Oh my gosh.
Where do we begin, right? It's kind of like, oh, go ahead.
Do we have like a couple hours? Because like, because I think, yeah, like, there's always a degree of education that you're providing, even just through your presence and, like, what it means to host you in a way that works for you, because, like, we all have particular access needs. And you know, institutions, I think, like in my experience, are good at putting up an exhibition, but really not skilled in hosting people, especially people with complicated and changing needs, because they kind of systemize ways of doing things. And like if there isn't already a way, like it's really like hard for them to really understand that and be flexible. They're very rigid. And maybe I'm talking about one institution in particular right now that's in my mind, but I think this applies to a lot of institutions. It's a function of the institutional structure. You know, the same one that is at play in the medical system, in the education system, in government, which, you know, these power structures that I think we in some ways are pushing against, because like what myself and Finnegan and I think Amanda want to and are kind of pointing to with our work, is is the possibility of disability culture, and that is something, if it's truly going to occupy the space of an institution, that institution would have to like radically transform in order to hold it in its and to honor it in its wholeness. You know, I think we live in a culture that is assimilate, like that expects us to assimilate into normie culture as disabled people. And yeah, and that's the same. Yeah, the museum, I think they really love consuming and extracting and presenting what they want from somebody. And I think we just because we as disabled people are like, we recognize the gaps in process, and we need things that yeah, are, I guess, sometimes are not familiar within that context. Sorry, I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I mean, 100% yes to the things that Carmen said. I think I feel, yeah, I feel the weight of it a lot. And I think one thing that I try to hold or remind myself is that, like, I as one person am not going to change the institution. In, you know, I'm not going to like rid the institution of ableism or something. Like that's actually a very like ableist or white supremacist kind of individual thing. And thinking about, I think I go back to this idea of like, what is my role, or what can I change here, and trying to yeah, hold like the imperfection of these processes, and how much is also outside of my control.
Great. This is Amanda speaking. Thanks both of you for answering that question. I know it's so complicated. There's a couple more questions in the Q&A, so I'm just going to read them out. This is by anonymous and attendee again. It says, I wish more conversations were being had about ableism within museum staffs and arts worker jobs. The fact that artists can be brought in and listened to for the span just for a grant, and then for all the learning and accommodation to be temporary. Have you ever followed up with institutions who have hosted you in the past, and do you feel like you have responsibility to follow up with them? Do the communities who have been introduced to your work get included in follow-up discussions? So who wants to go first?
To you.
I'm just taking a moment to take in that question. Yeah, I mean, I think I do often follow up or notice or track kind of how things play out over time. But I think also part of this question, I think, is about the ableism of the working, I mean, among many oppressive structures of the working conditions in institutions. And I think that is something that I often find institutions very unwilling to examine in a way that I find really frustrating. That there will be accommodations that they're willing to offer me as an artist that people on their staff would not have access to. Yeah, I think I don't have much more in this moment. I don't have much more to add besides, yeah, just like I feel, yeah, it's an area that I find really troubling.
Yeah, I mean, I feel similarly. So, like when with provisional structures, I'm trying to create a situation where I'm working with the institutions for, you know, maybe even years before the show goes up. And that process, like of like discussing accessibility and stating commitments and like talking about accountability, like it, you know, it'll exceed the timeline of our exhibition. I think also like the whole project is a reminder that like our presence there is temporary, you know, especially at a disability led or sorry, an institution that's not disability led. You know, for we will be here for a time. We will create a temporary collectively held space, but as after we're gone, it's really left to the institution and their community stakeholders and the people who are there that really are meaningfully included, including in their work to carry this work forward. And with the Mackenzie Art Gallery, they continue to work with Listen to Dis, who did like an accessibility audit for them and is continuing to do work for them. With the Vancouver Art Gallery, it's a bit more complicated, and like I really don't know what will happen moving forward. I'll definitely check in, but I'm in a point now where, yeah, like I don't know. I don't know like I can't just say because the show is up or because I've worked there, you know, the institution is a better place for people like in my community or people like me with a similar needs. Because like accessibility is an ongoing effort, like to make something accessible, it's so precarious to make
Yeah.
something accessible. It can easily fall apart, and it fall apart based on like the, you know, the people leaving, capacities waning, resources, political regimes, all sorts of things.
Thanks, Carmen. This is Amanda speaking. Actually, there's a question in the Q&A that just popped up, sort of kind of that follows along well from this discussion. It says, did the museums adopt any of the infrastructure, assistive aids, seating, etc., after your projects ended? So does anyone, either of you have an example? I mean, Carmen, you just mentioned the Mackenzie, but do you have any other examples?
Yeah, I mean, through our process with the Vancouver Art Gallery too, like they've gotten bench seating on all the floors now. You know, years ago, there were like I have a pretty severe pain condition as well, and like I need places to sit, and I find your work very generous, Finnegan, and just like yes, 100%. But yeah, the Vancouver Art Gallery didn't have places to sit, or enough of them until recently. So yeah, there's some of that, but those are so little. Like those wins are so little and few and far between. I think in you know in the worst cases, in the best cases, yeah, like it has created something that is being carried forward by people who care. Yeah.
Yeah, I think this has been the bench pieces in particular, I think are kind of asking to be obsolete, you know, like my vision for the future is not that every museum has one of those benches. Like actually what I can produce in terms of furniture is quite limited, and I would love a much more like abundant and varied approach to seating. And so that's kind of like my dream with that work, is that it eventually, there is no need for it because galleries are already like thinking through seating in really interesting ways that prioritize comfort. And I think I've also started to think about like how I could like dial up that request as I feel more like I can get a bench in. I'm like, okay, can we get a massaging chair? Can we get a, you know, let's, you know, things like that. So, yeah, and I think I'll also say, you know, with this project about alt text that I've been working on with Bojana, I feel like we have in that project been able to experience the way these little seeds get planted. For example, like there's a few times that we've been interviewed about the project, and the platform of the interview site has not once been screen reader accessible when prior to doing the interview, but in every interview we've like noted that, and there have been some like, yeah, kind of internal examinations of that and shifts, and so things like that. Yeah, I see it, but I think what Carmen said resonates a lot for me, which is that it's like the wins tend to feel really small and really incremental, especially in the face of just like how much I think museums need to change to like actually support disabled people in any sort of real way.
Thanks, Finnegan. This is Amanda speaking. I feel like, Finnegan, your answer also kind of speaks to a question by Jillian Crochet that's in the Q&A right now. I'll read it out. It says, what's a specific challenge that you faced with doing your work, and how would you go about it in your dream situation? So like, Finnegan, I love like, you know, you're aspiring to have like multiple and various forms of seating, but you can expand on that if you were to dream, and how to make these specific scenarios better for your own practice, but also for the benefit of disabled audiences in the museum as well.
Yeah, this has been, Jillian's question made me think a little bit about this project that I'm working on right now that does feel like kind of a dream experiment, which is that I've always had this kind of fantasy of not having to move around the gallery from artwork to artwork, but instead being able to like come and sit down and have the artwork come to me. And I'm working with a museum in Cleveland to build this conveyor belt that will move artwork through the space. And yeah, I don't know if that's in response to a specific challenge I faced. I mean, I guess my own like tiredness in museums. But I think, yeah, it feels like a real kind of like leaning into the fantasy moment where with that project.
Yeah, I guess for me, like, so I'm so proud of all the stuff that we've done with provisional structures, and it's been a great experience, like producing the project with the artists and like the institutions. You know, the experience varies based on which institution we're working with, and you know how committed they are. But I think for me, like a dream scenario in doing provisional structure would be having like a museum takeover, sort of maybe a year-long takeover, so we could produce the show with all of our people, instead of just being the few disabled people working on something. And maybe the existing staff, like certain members could like opt in or out, whether they feel like they're part of the disability community, and the rest of the staff can like support this, you know, our folks that would be taking over everything. That's kind of my dream scenario. Maybe, yeah, to have the support that we need to produce the show that we want to produce.
Thanks so much, Carmen. This is Amanda speaking. If there's anyone in the audience today, maybe we can make that happen. That would be so amazing. Sorry, Finnegan, did you want to add something?
No, I mean, I was just loving that dream. just getting excited.
Yeah, that is fantastic. We're getting close to the end now, but I wanted to read out, there's a comment by somebody in the chat too that I wanted to read out. because I think this is another way we can dream up a better future, is Dulce Aldema says, I teach at the Museum and Field Studies graduate program at CU Boulder, and it would be fantastic if you would agree to be a guest speaker, for example, in the exhibition development course to students in museology programs. So we stop teaching students traditional discriminatory practices and we start normalizing inclusivity. So it's also, I encourage you to reach out to the artists today and we can begin that practice of bringing them in and talking to museum studies students. That's a brilliant idea.
And I think we really need to normalize the idea of disability culture, really, because that's the thing that I instead of just the access supports, the fixtures, devices, etc. Sure, we need the benches, we need all of those things, but can our worldview be exist there and thrive there? I don't think it can right now, because disability culture is under threat, in so many ways right now. And I think it's with our role as artists, we get to be proponents of and champions of this beautiful culture that we're part of. But it's such a disability art doesn't happen all the time, and I think it's important when it does. And I think yeah, I guess it doesn't happen often enough in these mainstream spaces, because they can't really hold disability culture. I just yearn for a place that can, and where all of these possibilities can be realized for the worlds that we want to live in, because that's what we're gesturing towards with our work.
Thanks so much, Carmen. This is Amanda. Finnegan, did you have any closing words before we end today's discussion?
No, I felt like what Carmen just said is the perfect ending. That's such a nice note to end on. Thanks, Carmen.
Thank you both.
This is Sylvia coming in again from the University Art Gallery, and I just want to first say thank you so very much to the three of you for all of your discussion, your presentation, your generosity, both here and in the world. I want to actually add one of the comments that just came in from Danielle Linzer, who said, it's very lovely to see you all, and I have such gratitude for you sharing your practice and insights with all of us today. Keep on keeping on. And I want to say, let's all keep on keeping on. And especially for people who work out of university art museums like us, and we're training the next generation of museum professionals, what you have offered us today are wonderful pieces of information as we move forward and think about better ways of creating museums for the future that are truly inclusive. And thank you very, very, very much to each of you. I want to say thank you to everybody who's attended. And if you'd like to see past Turning Points, please visit our website at uag.pitt.edu. And please come back for our next Turning Points, which is April 13th, which will focus on pay equity in museums and ways in which we can move towards a more equitable pay structure in museums. For now, I want to send another thank you to everyone who's here in the Zoom room, especially our guests and our access workers, Nick, Sarah, and Madison. Thank you for making it possible for all of us to be here together. So thank you and have a good evening. Take good care.